mysterious woman whispers 5 words to a blind millionaire that change everything. "I can heal your eyes." From that moment, Julian Carter's carefully curated world begins to unravel. His fiancée, perfect on paper, seems to tremble at the presence of the soft-spoken stranger, Samantha Evans. As Samantha's gift begins to expose hidden truths, buried secrets surface, some more dangerous than either of them could have imagined. Is this a miracle in disguise, or a setup he never saw coming? One woman holds the truth. One man must choose whether to believe what he feels or trust what he cannot see. Samantha Evans had the kind of silence that made people uneasy. It wasn't shy or fragile. It was studied, intentional, like someone who had seen too much and learned to keep most of it to herself. When she walked into a room, people noticed. Not because she demanded attention, but because something about her made it impossible to ignore her for long. She moved like she didn't trust the floor to stay under her feet, always one step away from disappearing. At the Sunrise Clinic where she worked, the nurses called her the Whisper. Even when she spoke, her voice barely climbed above a hush, but somehow everyone heard her just fine. She didn't talk much about her past. Not that anyone asked anymore. The staff had learned quickly. Samantha heard things she shouldn't, noticed things no one else did. Like the married administrator who wore a different cologne only on Fridays, or the nurse who claimed she was vegan but always smelled faintly of bacon in the morning, Samantha saw through people. She didn't ask for this. Insight, it had simply arrived one day, long ago, like a curse passed down in the quiet of grief. That Tuesday afternoon started the same as any other, with Samantha folding towels in the break room and humming something low and sad under her breath. She was restocking the vitamin shelf near the front desk when the clinic door opened and everything shifted. Julian Carter walked in, guided by a soft-voiced assistant who held the door and announced his name like it belonged in gold letters. He wore dark sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and his stride was careful but not hesitant, confident. The air changed around him, like it always did when someone important entered a room and wasn't pretending not to be. Samantha didn't look up right away. She didn't need to. She could feel him. The receptionist stood awkwardly, flipping through forms that didn't matter, then cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, you're here for the... "My flu shot, yes," Julian said, his voice warm but clipped. "And to discuss your annual donation requests. Please call Dr. Nelson when she's free." His voice didn't match the stories Samantha had heard. People said he was cold, robotic, business to the bone. But his voice had a pause between words, like he was listening harder than most. Like he wasn't just hearing, he was absorbing. She turned then, eyes landing on him gently, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. Not because of his wealth or the tailored coat that probably cost more than her rent, but because he carried something she recognized. A hollow space behind his smile, a wound dressed up in success. He turned his head slightly, just enough to catch her in the peripheral he didn't have. "Who's that?" His assistant answered too quickly. "Just a nurse," Samantha answered for herself. "Technically, I'm not." Her voice was soft, but it made the room still. Julian tilted his head. "Then what are you?" Samantha stepped forward slowly, wiping her hands on her scrubs. She wasn't sure why she did it. Maybe something in her chest tugged too hard to ignore. "I help people find what's hurting them, even when they don't know where to look." There was a beat of silence. The assistant chuckled awkwardly and glanced at his phone. "She's kind of a holistic type. Staff volunteer. She helps around here." Julian's brow rose above the edge of his sunglasses. "Do you now?" Samantha didn't move. "You've been having pain in your upper spine. Not enough to call a doctor, but enough to wake you up at 3:17 a.m. It pulls down your neck, but the scans come back clean. Because it's not just physical." Julian didn't answer. His smile was still there, but fainter. "I haven't told anyone about that." "You didn't have to," Samantha said, eyes meeting his. For a long second, the room seemed to forget there were other people inside it. The receptionist stopped typing. The air conditioner clicked off. And Julian took one step closer, like her voice had reached out and grabbed him by the wrist. "What's your name?" "Samantha Evans." He nodded, repeating it in his head like he wanted to memorize how it sounded. Then he smiled again, genuine this time, and turned back to the desk. "Let me know when Dr. Nelson's ready. I'll wait." The assistant said something Samantha didn't catch, but Julian just waved him off and took a seat in the waiting area. She should have walked away. She had things to do. Pill bottles to sort, charts to file, tasks that kept her from thinking too much. But her feet didn't move. Something about this man. It called to her, like a memory she didn't own but had been carrying anyway. Later, as she walked past the seating area, Julian spoke again. "You ever work with people who can't see?" Samantha paused, then sat across from him without waiting for permission. "Sometimes it's easier. They don't look at me with their eyes. They listen better." Julian leaned forward, folding his hands. "Is that what I'm supposed to do? Listen?" "I'm not here to tell you what to do," she said gently. "But I think you're looking for something, even if you don't know what it is yet." He let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "I know what I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for miracles, Samantha. People promise those all the time." "I don't promise anything," she said. "I just see what others miss." Julian reached into his coat, pulled out a phone and tapped something. Probably a message to his assistant, or maybe a note for himself. Then he leaned back, head tilted like he was trying to catch her from another angle. "You're different? So are you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he touched the inside of his wrist, where his pulse beat steadily, and smiled like he was testing if it still matched the rest of him. "I'm having a dinner this Friday," he said. "It's a fundraiser. Big names. Too much champagne. Come." Samantha blinked. "Why?" "Because I want to know if you're real," Julian said quietly. "And I think I'll find out when you're standing next to my fiancé." Samantha's hand stayed folded in her lap, but her fingers tensed. "She won't like me." "No," Julian said with a slow smile. "She won't." Outside, a car horn honked twice, the sound of his ride pulling up. Julian stood, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve with practiced ease. "Samantha," he said, turning back once before he left, "if you ever decide you do promise miracles, I might believe you." And then he was gone. She sat in the chair a moment longer, unsure why her heart was beating like a warning bell. She didn't believe in fate, not really, but she knew signs, and that man carried the kind of shadow that only came from someone walking through life half blind, whether they could see or not. She closed her eyes and whispered to no one, "You're not ready for what I see." But Friday was coming anyway. Vanessa Quinn stood at the edge of the Carter estate's great room, a flute of champagne in her hand and a knife hidden behind her smile. She didn't drink, not really, at least not at these events. But she knew how to hold the glass just so, let the bubbles catch the light, and nod at the right people with that polished look that said, "I belong here and you don't." Everyone at Julian's fundraiser already knew her name. She made sure of it. She was elegance in motion, black satin dress clinging like it had been sewn to her body, hair sculpted to perfection, heels tapping like a metronome on the marble floor. People whispered when she passed, about her beauty, her poise, her precision. They didn't whisper about the way her jaw tensed whenever Julian turned his head toward another woman, or how she always made a point to remind people she was Vanessa Quinn, soon to be Carter. She had worked too hard for this. His world, his name, his wealth, his control. It was a fortress, and she had climbed every stone wall to reach the top. It hadn't been easy getting close to him. The man trusted no one. He read contracts like love letters and analyzed voices like lie detectors. But Vanessa had passed every test. Her voice never cracked. Her secrets never slipped. Until now. Because tonight, standing near the fireplace, smiling for photographers, Julian Carter was distracted. Not by the cameras, not by the donors, not even by the senator who flew in from D.C. just to be seen shaking his hand. But by her, the girl from the clinic. Vanessa had clocked her the second she entered the ballroom, Samantha Evans, no last name needed, just the floating rumor of her, walking beside Miles Bennett, Julian's oldest friend. Dressed simply in a navy blue dress that didn't try to impress, but somehow made everyone else look like they were trying too hard. She didn't belong here. And yet, Julian had smiled in a way Vanessa hadn't seen in weeks when Samantha walked in. Vanessa excused herself from a circle of executives and made her way toward them, every inch of her smile rehearsed. "Julian," she said smoothly, slipping a hand onto his arm, "you didn't tell me we'd be having new guests tonight." Julian turned his head slightly. "Vanessa, this is Samantha Evans. She helped me out earlier this week." Samantha extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." Vanessa took it, gently, with fingers that could crush glass if needed. "Likewise. You're a nurse?" "Something like that." Vanessa tilted her head. "Interesting. And how exactly did you two meet again?" "She works at the Sunrise Clinic," Julian said. "She has an intuition about people that's unusual." Vanessa let the sentence hang. "Unusual?" She gave a soft laugh. "Well, we certainly attract all kinds." Samantha's expression didn't shift, but Julian sensed some subtle change in the air around them. The tension was silk-thin, but present. Vanessa always knew how to press without seeming to. Julian turned back to Samantha. "I'm glad you came." She smiled gently. "So am I." Vanessa looped her arm more tightly through his. "Darling, they're ready for the toast." He nodded. "Of course." As Vanessa led him away, she glanced back once. Samantha was still standing there watching. Not with jealousy or judgment, but something else entirely. Stillness, like she already knew what would come next. Behind the bar, Miles leaned against the counter, sipping a watered-down whiskey. "She's good," he muttered to Samantha without looking at her. "She's polished," Samantha corrected. "Playing." The conversation seemed same difference in his world. Miles had known Julian since before the money, before the name on buildings, before the world bent around him. And he'd known Vanessa long enough to know something about her didn't add up. He couldn't prove it, not yet, but he'd seen enough people fake grace to recognize when it was being weaponized. "You see something I don't?" he asked Samantha, eyes still on the couple. "I don't see," she said softly. "I feel. She's cold, and not the kind you recover from." Miles turned to her now, fully facing her for the first time. "You've got Julian's attention. That's rare." "I'm not trying to keep it," she replied. "Good, because Vanessa will eat you alive if she thinks you are." Across the room, Vanessa's toast rang out. Hollow praise for generosity, community, philanthropy. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed without a single hitch. The crowd applauded, glasses raised, cameras clicked. But Julian's face never quite matched the moment. His smile held, but his hand resting on the edge of the podium tapped. 3 rhythmic beats, like someone searching in the dark for a wall they no longer trusted. "And some drinks?" Giannis repeated. "And some drinks?" He managed to smile and raise it to her. "I hope we deeper strikes like someone searching in the edge of the podium tapped." 3 rhythmic beats like someone searching in the edge of the podium. Tapped. Later that night, as the event thinned out and the air grew heavier with expensive perfume and half-spoken secrets, Samantha found herself alone on the back terrace, overlooking the garden. Julian joined her. "Too loud in there?" he asked. "Too fake," she answered. He smiled. "I used to think I liked it. The attention, the control, but lately, it feels like noise." She looked at him carefully. "You don't sleep much." "How would you know?" "Because you carry it in your shoulders. Your voice drops by 2 decibels when you're tired, and your watch is set 5 minutes fast, like you're chasing time instead of meeting it." "I never..." Julian exhaled. "What are you?" "I'm someone who sees pain and wants to understand it. That's all." "No," he said. "That's not all." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded envelope, handing it to her. "What is this?" she asked. "Something Vanessa doesn't know I kept. I want your thoughts." She opened it slowly. Inside were copies of documents, wire transfers, offshore account codes, signed permissions under Julian's name, but dated on days he was traveling abroad. Carefully buried. Not illegal, yet, but disturbing. Samantha's eyes scanned them. "These signatures, they're not yours?" "No, but they're close." "You think she's preparing something?" "I think she's already started." Samantha looked up at him, her voice barely audible. "You don't trust her?" "I stopped trusting people a long time ago." "And yet you handed this to me." He didn't answer. The silence said enough. Inside, Vanessa scanned the ballroom until she noticed the 2 of them outside. Her smile never broke, but her grip on the champagne glass tightened. A whisper to the waiter beside her, a nod, a smile, then she moved toward the terrace like a shadow chasing firelight. Samantha turned slightly, her eyes narrowing just before the door opened. "There you are," Vanessa chimed. "I've been looking all over." Julian straightened. "Just getting some air." Vanessa's eyes flicked to the envelope still in Samantha's hand. "She didn't mention it." "She didn't have to." "Mind if I borrow him for a moment?" Vanessa asked, voice sweet as syrup. Samantha stepped back. "Of course." As they walked away, Julian hesitated, just for a second, but he didn't look back. Samantha stayed on the terrace long after the doors closed, staring at the garden. Something was unraveling, she could feel it. And soon it would pull everything into the light. The kitchen smelled like burnt tea and lavender. A kettle hissed weakly on the stove as Grandma Ruth tried for the 3rd time to match the temperature to her memory instead of the dial. She never used thermometers, said they made people lazy. Samantha leaned over without a word and turned the knob down, rescuing what little water hadn't boiled away. She didn't need to ask if her grandmother needed help. She already knew. And Grandma Ruth, in her usual stubborn way, never asked for anything. They stood in silence as the steam curled into the air. The radio played softly in the background, a voice reading yesterday's news like it still mattered. Samantha reached for the chipped mugs, pouring the water over crushed herbs she'd gathered herself last week. Lemon balm for calming, chamomile for dreams, a bit of dried mint, not for healing but because it reminded her of home before the fire. "You're too quiet," Ruth said finally, lifting the mug to her lips and not even wincing at the heat. "That usually means something's weighing heavy." Samantha didn't look up. "I went to that fundraiser." Ruth gave a low hum. "The one for the tech man?" "Julian Carter." The blind one with all the buildings named after him. What about it?" "I met his fiancée, Vanessa." "Let me guess." Ruth leaned back in her chair, blind eyes facing the corner where light used to fall in the afternoons. She smiled like ice water and walked like she owned the floor. Samantha blinked. "How did you know that?" "I've known that type since before you were born. They come in every race, every face. but they all make the same mistake. What's that? They think silence means surrender. Samantha stirred her tea. The herbs swirled lazily, refusing to settle. I think she's dangerous. She is, Ruth said with certainty. You can feel her, can't you? Samantha nodded, though her grandmother couldn't see it. She has this presence. It's all polished edges and practiced warmth, but under it, there's something wrong. Like her voice has a second meaning if you listen sideways. Then don't ignore that. Not. But Julian trusts her. Or maybe just doesn't know how not to. Ruth took another sip, her weathered fingers tracing the rim of the mug like it held memories. You're getting pulled into something. I already am. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of years, full of ghosts. You ever think maybe your gift isn't just for warning others? Ruth asked. Samantha looked up. What do you mean? You spend all this time helping folks, seeing things they hide, things they're scared of. But maybe it's time you looked inward, child. Your past still walks with you. Samantha didn't reply. She didn't need to. The past always sat at the edge of her vision like smoke. She carried it in the way she moved, in the way she listened for things people didn't say. After Ruth went to rest, Samantha found herself in the attic. The old trunk still sat beneath the window, where rain tapped against the glass. She opened it slowly. Inside were newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and a journal with a cracked leather spine. The first photo showed her parents standing in front of their old bookstore. Evans and Page written in peeling gold above the door. Her mother held Samantha on her hip. Her father had one hand on her shoulder and another holding a worn paperback copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God. That bookstore was more than shelves and paper. It was safety. It was late nights reading aloud, mornings filled with the smell of binding glue and cinnamon rolls. Until the fire. They never found out what caused it. Electrical, they said, faulty wiring. But Samantha remembered the smell of gasoline. She remembered the way the fire spread too fast, too deliberately. Her parents hadn't made it out. She had, barely, pulled from the smoke by a stranger whose face she never saw, just the warmth of his arms and the low sound of a voice promising she'd be okay. The next few months blurred into grief and doctors, and then the gift. Or the curse. She began hearing the truths people didn't say, feeling their pain like a whisper through her bones. At first it terrified her. Then it started to guide her. Sometimes it warned her. Sometimes it protected her. It never left. And now it had led her here, to Julian, to Vanessa, to something she couldn't explain but knew was dangerous. The next day, Samantha sat across from Miles in a quiet corner of a library near downtown, the kind of place where secrets like to hide between shelves. You brought me all the way here just to sit in silence? He asked, raising an eyebrow. No, she said. I brought you here because this is the only place I trust to not have ears. Miles leaned forward, suddenly serious. What did you find? Vanessa has control of 2 of Julian's accounts, under his name. But the signatures aren't exact. Miles frowned. Forgery? Maybe. Or maybe she's using someone inside his legal team. Someone who can mimic his approval without drawing attention. She's careful, he muttered. She's practiced. Would she go through all that trouble? She's already engaged to him. Wouldn't marriage secure everything? Not if Julian's planning to change his will, or if she suspects he's having doubts. Miles paused. Is he? Samantha hesitated. He's starting to. But he doesn't trust himself. He doesn't see the world. He hears it. And Vanessa? She's good at sound. Miles rubbed his jaw. We need proof. I need time. You're running out of it. Samantha nodded. I know. That night, back at her apartment, Samantha sat on the floor with the journal she'd pulled from the trunk. Her mother's handwriting filled every page, not about books or customers or even her marriage, but dreams. Strange dreams about seeing pain in people's bodies, about knowing who would call before the phone rang, about standing in a room and hearing things no one said. She'd read until dawn. In the final pages, one line stood out, underlined 3 times. If this gift continues through her, teach her how to listen, but never let her forget to feel. Samantha closed the book and let the weight of it settle in her lap. She wasn't just walking into someone else's mystery. She was walking into her own. The past didn't just burn down the bookstore. It had lit a path she hadn't realized she was still following. Or with her family, herself. I'd take my time. Best had frowned on a digital. Julian didn't sleep that night. He lay on his back in the oversized bed with his 1,000-thread-count sheets and 2 silk pillows that were supposed to help him relax. They didn't. His fingers moved slowly across the nightstand, hovering just above the edge where he knew a frame sat. A photo of him and Vanessa, taken at a gala in Chicago, 6 months before the proposal. He remembered the scent of her hair that night, the way she leaned into his arm just before the cameras flashed, the small, delicate touch of her fingers tracing circles on the back of his hand. It had felt real then, but now his chest carried a weight he couldn't name. Samantha's voice still echoed in his ears, soft but certain. You're not imagining the silence, you're just listening to the wrong parts of it. He didn't know why those words haunted him more than anything Vanessa had said in weeks. The next morning, Julian requested a private meeting with Miles at his home. No assistants, no intercoms, no Vanessa. Miles arrived without a tie, hair slightly out of place, holding a folder under his arm. Do you ever ask yourself what you'd do if you found out the person closest to you was slowly cutting the ground out from under your feet? Julian asked, as he poured 2 cups of black coffee. Miles nodded, accepting the cup. All the time. I'm a lawyer. You're serious? So Julian took a long sip, then handed Miles a piece of paper. Samantha noticed a withdrawal pattern. 2 offshore accounts. The signature isn't mine. I had my assistant check the dates. I wasn't even in the country during 2 of the transactions. Miles opened the folder he'd brought and laid out several crisp sheets. I've been digging since the night of the fundraiser, quietly. I pulled records through a back door, Julian, only clause you wrote into your financial protection agreement 4 years ago. Vanessa doesn't know it exists. Julian raised an eyebrow. What did you find? 2 things, Miles said. 1, someone rerouted a payment from your real estate portfolio into a shell corporation, the same name as one Vanessa used when she invested in that wellness brand last year. 2, there's a man. Julian's jaw tightened. What kind of man? Private banker, East Coast, works exclusively with high-net clients, and he's been meeting Vanessa at a hotel in Manhattan every second Thursday of the month for the last 5 months. Julian blinked, face unreadable. I don't know what it means yet, Miles said carefully, but it's not just dinners. I pulled building entry logs. They go in together. He leaves first, she leaves 2 hours later. Does she know you're watching her? Miles hesitated. No, but she knows someone is. Julian leaned against the edge of the kitchen island, both hands flat against the marble. I proposed to her, Miles. I know. I told her things I've never told anyone. But Julian didn't speak again for a long time. When he finally did, it was with the weight of someone who'd been forced to see something he couldn't look away from. I need to know everything, he said, and I need it fast. By late afternoon, Samantha stood at the far end of the city park, watching children toss leaves at each other beneath the long arms of a sycamore tree. Her fingers were wrapped around the handle of a paper bag filled with groceries. but she hadn't moved in 15 minutes. Officer Dana Riley approached slowly from the side, her badge flashing only when the sunlight caught it just right. "You don't look like someone who called in a favor," Dana said. Samantha looked up, blinking as though surfacing from deep water. "Thanks for coming." Dana crossed her arms. "You said it was about Julian Carter. Thought you were volunteering at a clinic." "I still do. And now you're also watching Manhattan's most elusive millionaire?" Samantha gestured toward the bench. They sat. "He's in danger," Samantha said. "Not from strangers, from inside his own life." Dana gave a quiet laugh. "That's called money." "No," Samantha said firmly. "This is deeper. Vanessa Quinn is covering something. I need access to any open investigations tied to her or her previous partners." Dana's brows lifted. "That's a steep ask." Samantha reached into her coat and pulled out a printed image, one of the documents Miles had retrieved. She slid it across the bench. "Two of those wire transfers connect to a fund that was investigated 3 years ago. Fraud, laundering, a pending indictment that disappeared after a settlement. Vanessa's signature appears twice under a pseudonym used by one of the parties under review." Dana's face lost its humor. "Where'd you get this?" "Come to help." "Does it matter?" "Only if I want to make sure no one gets buried for digging too deep." Samantha met her gaze evenly. "Please, he needs help." Dana exhaled. "I'll look into it. But if I find out you're playing games, I'll walk. Clear?" "Clear." As Dana walked away, Samantha stayed on the bench, heart racing, palms sweating against the fabric of the grocery bag. The trap wasn't just being built, it had already been set. And Julian was already standing in the center of it. That evening, Vanessa stood in Julian's home office, arms folded as she watched him finish a phone call. He was calm, too calm. It made her uneasy. "You've been quiet today," she said finally. Julian turned toward her slowly. "Have I?" "You canceled the investor dinner. Skipped your meeting with Wesco Holdings. That's not like you." "Maybe I needed a day to breathe." Vanessa moved closer, setting her hand on his shoulder. "If something's bothering you, I want to know." He gave a small smile. "Of course." She leaned in, brushing a kiss to his cheek. "We should talk about the wedding soon. Set a real date." Julian nodded. "Let's do that." Vanessa pulled back, searching his face for something. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. But for the first time, Vanessa felt something unfamiliar rise in her throat. A flicker of fear. Across the city, Samantha climbed the creaky steps of her grandmother's porch, knuckles tight around a folder of new findings. But before she could knock, she saw the door already open a crack. She pushed it gently. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "Grandma Ruth?" she called. No answer. The scent of lavender still hung in the air, but something else floated underneath it. Something sharp. A metallic. She stepped inside, heart pounding. The living room was undisturbed. The tea kettle on the stove whistled faintly, long forgotten. Then she saw it. A note on the kitchen table. Typed, no signature. "Stay away from Julian Carter, or she won't be the last." Her breath caught. She turned and felt something crack against the back of her head. The world spun, and then everything went dark. The ceiling came into focus slowly, like it had been waiting for her to return. Samantha blinked through a haze of pain, the back of her head pulsing with heat, her breath shallow. The room was unfamiliar. Bare walls, a flickering overhead bulb, concrete floor cold beneath her palms. Her wrists weren't bound, but her body felt heavy, as if the fear alone weighed her down. She sat up, wincing, then pressed her hand to the back of her skull, dried blood. A sharp ache, but no fracture. Whoever had knocked her out hadn't meant to kill her. Not yet. The thought made her stomach twist. The door opened. Vanessa stepped in. She wore a gray coat, not tailored like usual, but clean and pressed. Her heels clicked softly as she approached, a calm storm in motion. No smirk, no raised brow, just a quiet certainty that she controlled everything in the room, including the woman sitting on the floor. "I was hoping you'd stay out of it," Vanessa said, "but people like you never know when to stop." Samantha didn't move. "Where's my grandmother?" "Alive, for now. She's not the one I want." Samantha's voice was hoarse. "Then why threaten her?" "Because you wouldn't listen to anything else. You keep digging, whispering to Julian, turning him against me." "I didn't turn him," Samantha said. "You did." Vanessa gave a slow, tired smile. "He's blind, but he's not stupid. It was only a matter of time." Samantha's fingers curled into the floor. "So what's the plan? Intimidation? A clean getaway with a suitcase full of offshore cash?" "You think small," Vanessa replied. "That's your problem. You think in terms of good and bad, pain and healing. But the world doesn't care about your soft little gift. It respects power." Samantha looked up. "You don't want him. You want what he gives you." "I want what I've earned," Vanessa said, voice rising. "Years of work, of being the perfect fiancé, smiling for investors, dressing his wounds with praise and obedience. I built the life around him. That fortune should belong to me." "It never belonged to you," Samantha said quietly, "and it never will." Vanessa stared at her for a long moment, then turned to the door. "You'll stay here until the money clears. Then you'll wake up in some empty road outside the city and tell yourself it was just a warning. You'll keep your mouth shut. And if you don't, the next person I visit won't be your grandmother." The door slammed behind her. The lock clicked, and the light flickered again. Samantha closed her eyes, breathing through the pain. Then she focused. She reached inside herself, not for strength, but for clarity, for the stillness that always arrived when the world became too loud. She listened, and somewhere, beneath the ache, beneath the fear, she felt it. The pull, not of sight or sound, but of energy, of awareness. She could feel the outline of the room, the sharpness of the corners. She could feel the residue of pain left behind by others who'd sat here before. But more than anything, she could feel him, Julian. Not physically, not near, but tethered, like a line stretching from her chest to his, invisible but unbreakable. And then it clicked. Her gift hadn't just been warning her about Vanessa. It had been preparing her. She stood, steady, slower than usual, but not broken. She tested the door. Metal, thick, locked from the outside. But the window was small, too small to climb through. She scanned the room for anything that could help. A pipe rusted and loose along the wall. She yanked it free. And then, slowly, she waited. Because Vanessa had made one mistake. She assumed Samantha was alone. But Julian had already started asking questions. At that same moment across the city, Julian Carter stood in his office, his hand pressed against the back of the same photo he hadn't touched in months. The one of him and Vanessa. His thumb traced the edge of the frame, where a folded paper was tucked into the lining. A note, written by Samantha. He'd found it earlier that morning, slipped under his front door in a sealed envelope. No return address, no message, just a series of account numbers and one sentence. "She's moving faster than we thought." And now Samantha wasn't answering her phone. Miles had called. No answer. Her grandmother's house? Empty. No one had seen her since last night. Julian's instincts weren't screaming, they were howling. "She's in danger," he said. Miles nodded. We're already tracking her phone. Officer Riley's helping. One of the signals pinged near the river but then vanished. Looks like a burner phone was involved. Julian clenched his jaw. She said something to me once, about pain being louder than truth. Sounds like her. She always sees things before anyone else does. So what do we do? Miles asked. Julian turned toward him, his voice steady but steel-lined. We listen. Within the hour, Officer Riley tracked the signal to a warehouse off Route 12. She dispatched a team. By the time they arrived, Samantha had already broken the lock with the pipe and limped halfway down the access road. The officers surrounded her, guns lowered, shouts echoing into the open air. But she didn't stop walking. She just said, "Julian Carter sent you." They lowered their weapons. And minutes later, she was in the back of a cruiser, wrapped in a blanket, her voice dry but unbroken. "He's planning to leave the country, tonight. We don't have much time." Julian met her at the station. The moment he stepped into the room, she turned toward him, though he hadn't made a sound. He reached for her, and this time she took his hand without hesitation. He touched her face, lightly, brushing the edge of the bruise near her temple. "She tried to break you," he said. "She doesn't understand the difference between broken and changed." They sat in silence for a beat. Then she took his hand and placed it gently against her chest. "Julian," she whispered, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something you need to know." He waited. "I can't give you back your eyes," she said, "but I can help you see again." He didn't pull away. He just whispered, "Show me." And so she did. Not with magic, not with miracles, but with truth. She let him listen. Not to her voice, but to the energy she carried, the way she read a room without seeing, the way she found pain without being told. She pressed his fingers to her pulse, then to her jaw, then guided his hands outward as she described the world around them, its edges, its weight, the emotions floating in the air like dust. He inhaled sharply, overcome. "It's like the world is speaking in a language I never knew existed," he murmured. "You've always had the ears for it," she said. "You just needed someone to remind you how to use them." When the officers returned to the room, they carried a warrant. Vanessa had been intercepted at the private airfield with a forged passport and a briefcase full of wire transfer records. The man from the bank was already in custody. Charges were being filed. It was over. But for Julian and Samantha, something was only just beginning. He reached for her again, slower this time. "I spent my whole life believing sight was about light," he said. "But you've shown me it's about truth." Samantha smiled, weary but radiant. "I didn't heal your eyes," she said. "No," he replied. "You healed everything else." 3 months later, Julian Carter stood in the middle of a small community garden in Westbridge, his cane resting loosely in one hand, a single sunflower in the other. The sun warmed his face, and the sound of children laughing bounced off nearby brick walls like music. He didn't need his sight to know this place was alive. Behind him, Samantha guided a little girl back toward the flower beds, gently correcting the way her tiny fingers cradled a budding tomato plant. The girl nodded, her oversized sun hat slipping over one ear, and Samantha chuckled softly as she fixed it. Her laugh had changed in the last few months. Lighter, freer. It carried through the air like wind chimes. Julian turned his head toward her voice. "That laugh," he said with a smile, "could cure 1,000 wounds." Samantha looked up from the garden bed, brushing dirt from her hands. "It's just laughter." "No," he said. "It's proof." "Of what?" "That you survived." She stood and walked over to him, linking her arm through his with the same ease as if they'd done it for years. "So, did you?" Together they walked the edge of the garden, the scent of mint and basil trailing after them. Around them life unfolded in soft rhythms, sprinklers hissing, birds darting through low branches, the occasional flutter of bee wings brushing against petals. It was the grand opening of the Carter Community Wellness Center, built not in Julian's name, but in honor of someone who never asked for recognition. A plaque near the entrance read, "For those who listen deeper, inspired by Samantha Evans." After Vanessa's arrest, things unraveled quickly. The forged documents, the offshore accounts, the fraud, the manipulation. Julian's legal team, backed by Miles and Officer Riley, ensured that justice was thorough and that no part of Vanessa's scheme went unexposed. Julian had made a public statement just once, a short, honest speech in front of a row of cameras where he said, "I didn't lose my sight because of an accident. I lost it long before that. Trusting the wrong people, believing silence meant safety. But someone taught me to see again, not with my eyes, with truth." He never mentioned Samantha by name, but she didn't need him to. That night, the world began to see her too. She'd turned down interviews, declined sponsorships, even refused an offer to write a book. What she accepted was something smaller, quieter. The garden, the clinic, the people who needed someone to sit beside them and say nothing while understanding everything. She didn't stop hearing pain, but now she didn't carry it alone. As they passed the fence line of the garden, a group of volunteers waved at Julian, their hands dusty from mulch. He lifted his cane in acknowledgement. "You ever miss it?" Samantha asked. "Miss what?" "The buildings, the applause, the world bending to your name." Julian paused. "Sometimes. But that world always felt like a borrowed suit, too tight in the chest, never quite mine. And this one?" He turned his face toward the breeze. "This one fits." They sat on a bench beneath a willow tree that had only just begun to bloom. Samantha tucked her legs under herself, barefoot from wandering through the garden's soil. Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Samantha blinked. "Are you seriously giving me jewelry in the middle of a tomato patch?" "Not jewelry," he said. She took it cautiously and opened the lid. Inside was a small, smooth stone, clear as glass but etched with tiny ridges in a swirling pattern. She ran her fingers over it. "Braille?" He nodded. "It says, 'Home.'" Samantha's eyes glistened. "Where did you get this?" "I had it made from one of the pieces of stained glass they recovered from the fire at your parents' old bookstore." She froze. Her breath caught. "I thought it was gone," she whispered. "Some things survive," Julian said, "even when they shouldn't." She held the stone in her palm for a long time, her thumb tracing the word over and over again. "You've been doing your research." "I've been listening." She smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I don't need a ring." "I know," he said. "That's why I gave you something real." They sat in silence as the sun began to lower behind the rooftops. Gold poured through the trees, casting dancing shadows on the grass at their feet. Children ran past them, trailing kites made of string and cardboard. An elderly man near the garden entrance sang a hymn softly to himself while pulling weeds from the sidewalk cracks. And the world just settled. For the first time in a long time, it felt like peace wasn't a myth. Later that evening, back at the clinic, Samantha placed the stone on the windowsill of her small office. The light hit it just right, refracting into tiny rainbow streaks across the wall. She turned on a small tape recorder, one she'd used for years to capture her thoughts when the weight of her gift got too loud. She pressed record. "Today," she began softly, "I saw a man laugh with his whole chest. I saw children plant something they believed would grow. I saw a garden built by hands that used to tear things apart. And I felt, more than ever, that pain doesn't end us, it roots us. It teaches us to speak when others whisper and to trust what we feel even when the world tells us not to." She paused, then smiled. "I think I'm home." She clicked the recorder off. Outside the window, Julian waited by the gate. She stepped outside and took his hand, and together, with no grand fanfare, no headlines or flashbulbs, they walked into the soft night. The darkness no longer frightened either of them.